Good evening, good evening, good evening. I'm just about to go live. We're waiting for people to sort of drop by. This is a session of the Freudian Spaceship group. So this is kind of group conversations with whoever drops by, mainly people from the seminar that was on the Freudian Spaceship course. We've had a couple of sessions so far, and this week we will be looking a little bit at joyful militancy, a text by Montgomery and Bergman, 2017 AK Press. I've done a little reading of that. So that's available on my stream or on my YouTube if you want to have a listen to that, or obviously you can have a read of it. It's around, it's in AK. I'm just going to play a little trailer for the Free University Brighton, who kind of host us and who I'm a part of, and then we'll bring some people in and have a natter. Hi, good evening, and I'm going to bring in Morrigan and Rob and Gabby. Hello. Sam and Helen are also in the studio room, but Sam's feeling like he wants to just sit back in the back at the moment, and I'm not sure about Helen. She's got a video off. So if you're watching or you want to participate in chat, you're welcome to do so. We have a chat channel on the Twitch, the Facebook and the YouTube pages. Give us a chat there if you want to add something, drop a note in, have a question. And for participants, we have our own little private chat. Just X up in that when you're willing to speak, or if I do something absolutely terrible that you need to tell me about, like switch my mic off, because I tend to do that sometimes. And tonight, and there's John. Hello, John. Let's bring in John. So tonight we were going to look at friendship. Freedom and friendship. Those were the kind of, oh, hang on, I've got someone else there. No, that's right. Freedom and friendship. And I was looking at, other people were looking at the short text, an extract from Joyful Militancy, a book by Bergman and Montgomery from 2017. So that's the kind of framework for tonight. So before we go any further, can we just say hi and how your week has been, peeps? And how you feeling? Everyone looks tired. Everyone looks tired tonight. Okay, I'm just going to let people go around, and I'm going to mute my mic in between. So probably the same if we do the same. So Rob, how about you? How about you go first? How have you and how's your week been?
Yeah, I'm pretty good, thank you. I'm back at work, pretty much. Like the children are back at work, and like new term and things. I work with children, so we've got new term starting, so it's a bit stressful. But yeah, all good, thank you. And I really enjoyed the text, by the way, I just saying. And thank you for recording the audio, because
oh right, yes,
it was a really busy weekend, and it was really useful to listen to it in the car.
Yeah, I thought it might be nice, and it might just be good for anyone. If you're seeing this or watching this afterwards, there is also an audio version of the extract that we were looking at around on some of the YouTube, Facebook, Twitchy pages. Gabby, how are you?
Hey, Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Good to be here. Nice, hot, sunny day. Probably the last few days of the summer. That final push before autumn comes. It's been boiling. Yeah. I've spent the last week. I've been practicing a bit of the do easy stuff. A little bit from last week's essay for viewers. And that has been an interesting experiment. Kind of fun. Yeah. So that's been my week, really, without getting into many more details. It's been a nice week.
Cool. I kind of want to hear more about the do easy, but I'm going to carry on with the introductions. And Morrigan, I kind of know how your week's been, but for everyone else, you can tell them.
Here I am in a blouse. I started teacher training today, so my week has been one of being like just basically shit scared. So yeah, it's cool. I'm doing a daily commute of 60 miles, which as a not very experienced motorcyclist is quite challenging. But overall, the past week, which was the question, it was nice shouting at Gabby from a traffic jam. Really sorry about that, and expecting her to recognize me even though I was in a crash helmet with a blacked out visor. So that was a bit of a big ask. And I did really enjoy being reminded of the Nina Simone. It was like the universe via Rob reached into my consciousness. And yes, Rob is not to know what that song means to me. But so I love that. And I'm afraid I haven't listened to your reading, Matt, nor have I read the piece myself. But I'm very looking forward to being here this evening.
Excellent. Yes. So for those who are watching, we have a conversation as well as on Monday evenings in River, which is the Free University Brighton platform that we kind of teach and organise in. So if you're interested in getting involved in the Free University Brighton and you're down here in the South Coast Free Brighton area, go to freeuniversitybrighton.org. And there's a page there that will show you how to get involved in learning in our community. Tell us a little bit more about the do easy, Gabby, before we go to the friendship and freedom thing. Because I think that's good. Recapping a little bit from last week, we were talking about William Burroughs' do easy as a kind of way of getting into flows, and I was suggesting it had some relationship to maybe Freudian slips as well. The slips he's talking about in do easy. We had that kind of conversation. I was curious about that. So yeah, what was your experiment with do easy like?
So it's been it mostly feels like a little mental trick to do mindfulness, really. Like I've tried mindfulness stuff in the past as a kind of just being aware type thing. But here it's like, okay, there's a goal set, even if it's like one of the most open and easy flowing goals you could possibly have, which is whatever you're doing, see if you could do it easier. And just like whatever. So to that mind, trying to constantly bring my attention back to whatever I'm doing, whether it's opening a door, whether it's doing the washing, whatever. And I find that little, for me personally, that little kind of goal, that task-oriented kind of thing, just enough gives enough of a kind of incentive for my brain to actually get quite into being to constantly bringing my awareness back to what I'm doing, as opposed to being way off that, which can often be the case with my thoughts. I found that it sometimes brings up the feeling like I'm riding a bike without hands, or just with my eyes closed, without if I'm trying to focus on something, and like without my brain kind of trying to, if I'm trying to give 100% of my brain to fucking opening the door or whatever, hanging up the washing line, it's without, if my brain is not modeling, it really wants to model whatever kind of future is possibly going to happen, whatever's coming, or just whatever kind of speculative thought is going through my head at the moment. And I realized that kind of without that, it does feel like, when I get the moments without that, it feels a bit like I'm riding a bike without hands and with my eyes closed. It's like, okay, I need to learn a whole new kind of sensory way of interacting with the world. Like, it's possible, but you need to learn a whole new way of relating to the body, which is cool. I guess it's cool. It's been a cool, interesting few days of phenomenological exploration.
Yeah, that's a really interesting kind of. Is it an image or a metaphor? I'm not sure if it's an image or a metaphor, but that thing about riding a bike without your hands, and like people on motorbikes do this sometimes, and I can't quite do it because I ride a cruiser, and it doesn't quite work the same way. But you see them sometimes like riding their bike, and you can actually ride your bike just with your body. And in fact, it's a really kind of it's a big shift when you're riding a motorbike from riding with your hands and your feet to when you feel it in your bum. You can basically, because that's like one of the main things, your bum and your legs, you can like move the bike around, and it is a very kind of strange, disconcerting kind of moment, because you were so used to our hands being the interactive relationship with the world, or most of us, if we've got access to our hands as a, in that way, we're so used to our hands being that kind of dominant relationship to the world. Perhaps that's one of the things that's maybe meant by the relationship to the body. Actually, is like, well, actually that means more than the hands. That does mean something like riding a bike, with your hands off the steering. It's a really interesting image. Anyone else want to come onto that image? That's a terrible line. I won't use that again. Someone could highlight that. Anyone else want to comment on that image?
I mean, it's an interesting idea, isn't it? The riding the bike without the hands, but more specifically with the eyes closed, because it's one thing to use your whole body, because you have to balance your whole body to ride a bicycle or indeed a motorbike without your hands on the handlebars, but to do it with your eyes closed, it's some sort of like ultimate faith that the machine that you're on, let's say a bicycle, it is actually going to stay upright, and is also going to continue going in basically a straight line. No one's going to do that while trying to make a left or a right turn, are they? But it's that idea that somehow something is sufficiently earthed or planted to be able to continue on a predictable trajectory, and the closing of the eyes. I might just be talking complete bollocks here, but the closing of the eyes is almost like that. It's almost like a moment where it's a sort of kind of pure knowledge of, and this is what is the case. The bicycle will stay upright. It will travel in a straight line. There won't be any unexpected obstacle that will be encountered that will cause me injury or something like that. So I can see how that's related to freedom, because it's a kind of, it's not that it's it's not that it's trust or faith or something like that. It's that the risk becomes unmediated by a punishment. If you see, am I making any sense at all? So just because the risk is taken, it's not even perceived as a risk. It's seen as a kind of like, risk is a risk if something bad happens as a consequence. But to just kind of like close your eyes and ride a bike is like saying the consequence isn't always badness. The consequence can be something else. And it can be the machine and the person working together to achieve the designed effect that's meant to be achieved.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of brought the image to mind also was like the very visceral sense. If you try this on a bike, like you'll get that sense of your body's feeling the balance is going to be off, and it wants to yank you to whatever thing is that sense of like it's stuff is about to fall out of control, and like you kind of have to keep forcing yourself to go back to that space of imbalance and find the balance there, if you want to learn how to ride a bike without hands with your eyes closed. But I had the same a similar kind of sense, if only in much smaller scale, of my body kind of or my head, my mind trying to yank me back to being aware of all the things that think so important, which actually have nothing to do, and I can't do anything about in the moment of whatever I'm doing, whether it's the dishwashing or whatever. But like feel like it needs to, for some reason, even though I don't have the hands on the bike, it wants me to rebalance with the hands rather than rebalance with the legs. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Betty and John, who are coming in. There we are. We were just where are we? Let's try this one. There we go. Let's try that sort of thing. We were just chatting about Do Easy and Gabby's sense that this felt like doing the Do Easy felt like riding a bike with no hands and blindfold. Betty and John, do you want to say hi and just how you been this week? And
yeah, I'm on my travels now. I'm at a place called Skipsea, which is a very nice place, but it's in the dark age when it comes to internet. So I'm sitting in a car park. It's the only place I can get internet. So
brilliant. You can't do a seminar unless someone's in a car park. How are you, Betty?
I'm not super great today. I've been working a lot, and I had a 7 a.m. start this morning and another 7 a.m. start tomorrow. I'm a bit exhausted.
Oh yes, the work has started again. Morrigan's up and about, and I think Rob's here. It's one of those. It's September and everything's starting up. It's weird. It hasn't, because it didn't start up last year after the COVID thing, did it? Did you have anything else? Anyone want to have any comments on the Do Easy bike thing at the moment? But I definitely think that's an interesting one that we can pursue more. But anyone want to have any more on that? We all good? Go on there, Rob.
I just unmute. I was just gonna it's a really interesting image, and it kind of resonated with the stuff we were talking about with Nina Simone, and this kind of flow state that she appeared to be in during this performance, where it was just like everything came together, and it was just like perfect performance, and it's like I don't know, it reminded me of that, that kind of, I mean, that's like that's a really intense version of that, but in a way, imagine if you could have that sort of sense of flow in everything you did. That'd be a kind of an amazing thing, like whether it was doing up your shoelaces or, you know, ringing a friend, whatever it was. So yeah, it just reminded me of that kind of discussion we had. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, and it reminds me, I mean, of the word play as well. I mean, I think when you were talking about risk, Morrigan, the word play was coming to mind. There's some things that, you know, we kind of stop kids doing because we think they're risky. That's risky. And in fact, they don't see any risk there. They're just playing, and like kids playing on skateboards and, you know, on bikes, seeing how high they can make them jump, or God knows what else, and strange things. So there's definitely something to do with play. Yeah, the flow state's a weird one, isn't it? If we could, would it be a flow state if we were in it all the time? I'm not sure. Morrigan. Yeah, mute.
Yeah, I know I'm muted. It's that private chat window that you have to collapse and pops up. Yeah, I'm interested in the way that you've taken it to play there, because it almost, you know, one of the, sorry to keep banging on about Nina Simone. I mean, the Silver Mount Zion actually refer to Nina Simone as a god in one of their tracks, and it is something that's unbridled, you know, in the way that you bridle a horse, you put a bit in its mouth and then you drag on a piece of metal that's in its mouth to get it to behave. There are other bridles that people use, and I'm lucky enough to have ridden a horse that hasn't had, well, ridden without bits in horses' mouths, and that kind of like sense of the unbridled, the kind of like lack of the punitive in the performance, if you see what I mean. That comes through the Nina Simone thing. And in terms of the play, I mean, Betty suggested something about joy, and I think joy and play, maybe not necessarily playfulness, but joy and play are really intrinsically linked to freedom in a way that I hope we get a chance to explore.
Yes, that sounds good. Okay, Helen, can you can we hear you? Come and say you should. I can't see you, but you should be able to hear you. Ah, there we are. Yeah, video pops on then. Are you muted?
I'm here, I think. I don't know what that
yes,
button
we can
is.
see and hear you.
Yeah, no, I've got amnesia. It's really strange. I was just having dinner tonight, and I just realised I don't remember anything about my life anymore. But for some reason, I just automatically, like, my alarm went off, and I knew I had to do something at 6:55 this evening, and I just automatically just turned on the light and went to rush, turned it, trying to yeah, it's weird, but I don't know what we're talking about. Sorry.
Right. Well, I'm probably not going to be able to help with.
Yeah, no, I do kind of recollect something about Ginsberg or something, but is that right?
We're talking about Burroughs and Do Easy, and Gabby's sense when she was experimenting with it this week of it feeling like riding a bike without your hands on the handlebars and riding it with your eyes shut. It was partly to do with that image. Okay. So yes, tonight we were talking a little bit about freedom. We came to this one from the end of last week's sort of discussion, and so Betty suggested we read a bit from Joyful Militancy, and it's part of chapter 2 where they begin to talk about a different kind of model of friendship. Betty, do you want to talk to this and say a little bit about what was interesting about it for you, and what do you feel up for that?
Okay, let's see if I've got any brains left. Well, okay, so this this book, Joyful Militancy, is I've kind of been reading it on and off for a few years now, mostly because I like it so much that I just keep going back to it, and it kind of feels like it really speaks to me in the ways that it frames the world and frames kind of social and political issues. So I've wanted to discuss it with people for a really long time, and there you go, I've got the opportunity. And I picked this bit because, because we've been talking about community and friendship, and we talked about freedom last time. I guess I wanted to hear your opinion. So the kind of the basic premise of the book is there is something that they call empire, which is, I guess, global capitalism intersecting with various structures of oppression, and they try to conceptualize ways of being joyful and resisting the, I guess, stifling effects of empire. And in this particular chapter, they're talking about so they use mostly Spinoza, a bit of Deleuze and Guattari, a lot of indigenous thinking around these issues. They are based in what is currently Canada, I think, Vancouver. And in this particular chapter, they are talking about a different understanding of freedom and what freedom is. And they're trying to, I guess, criticize the kind of white, masculine, Western definition of freedom as the absence of restrictions, and kind of this kind of Hobbesian idea of social contract and the Leviathan and all of that we might be familiar with. And they're trying to suggest a kind of more relational idea of freedom, and freedom as friendship, or like friends as the people who help us towards freedom, I guess. And yeah, I just wanted to hear what your opinion was on these things, basically.
Yes, I'm a bit. I have to confess to kind of like a double kind of sense when I read a text like Joyful Militancy, which I really loved as well. I think it's a really interesting book, and a kind of quite. Is the word groundbreaking a bit cheesy? It's groundbreaking in that it really does try and think through a different way of like considering what's political, and it kind of moves friendship into the political. But I'm also got my other head on, which is the kind of typical philosophy head thinking, yeah, what's wrong with this? What's not working? What's going to go wrong? So I want to keep away from that for a little bit, because that's the toxic philosopher thing, but it's going to be around, so I might come back to it later once we've sort of settled into things. But I'm going to sort of say, does anyone else have any particular comments to start with? Let's just sort of just open it up to, like, if you've had a look at the text, or you had a read of it, or you had a listen, any initial thoughts? Gabby, Rob, any initial thoughts on the actual text, on what you saw, on whether you liked it, whether it's something interesting, a line that stuck, anything particular?
Yeah, so I read it quickly today, and I really didn't make any notes, so I'm gonna have to try and come back to it by memory. But I enjoyed it. I at least the beginning, or like most of it. Towards the end, maybe less so. But we could come back to that. I So the main point, which I think is summed in the section heading "Friendship is the root of freedom," I think is great. I think there's that quote from the Invisible Committee. I'm just trying to find it. About how, or maybe it wasn't. So the notion that to remove the obstacles, to remove the things that are traditionally kind of considered the obstacles to our freedom, would be to remove the things that to remove the very things that we enact our power upon, that we enact our capacities as beings upon. It's like this idea that like freedom and constraint are kind of interlinked conceptually, ontologically, or something. It's just like, yeah, that's my shit. So yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of diving into that a bit more.
Anyone else? Anyone else on that one? What have we got? Let's just put this here. Let's put this all here. John.
Yeah, I find it interesting in the fact that, as I said to you before, I sort of failed at jobs, and I can never understand why, and I've tried lots of different ways. And the way that this text read, when you read it to me, it felt like there was an explanation for me in the fact that the Hobbesian view is you have to fit inside a box if you want to do well. And the Spinoza way says you're basically in the middle and you push outwards. And so it makes much more sense to me that I'm not trying to find the corners anymore and make sure I don't step outside them. Really, I'm just pushing forward. I just have to make sure people come with me a bit more so I don't get into trouble. So it was actually quite an enlightening piece, and I had to listen to it twice. But it felt like a light bulb went on for me.
Yeah, I mean, at the heart of it, there is definitely this really quite drastic difference between a kind of traditional philosophical mode of morality and you know, an image of a human, and the Spinozan, this kind of this interesting idea that we are free insofar as we are tied. We are free insofar as we have connections. We are free insofar as we are sort of part of a collective. I've got a lot of frozen videos on my screen.
I'll use an example. You know, when I was a policeman, I was worried about becoming a policeman or police officer because I felt that I would be surrounded by people I wouldn't get on with. And as it ended up, when it went south for me, I was surrounded by people who didn't seem to understand. So they had their little box of what a police officer should be, and my box was different to that. And though internally I know that I was right, it felt right to do what I did and the way I behaved. I don't know, that explanation there gives me like a moral. So yeah, I was doing the right thing because I was pushing outwards rather than staying within the box. So that's insightful for me.
I think there's something curious. I mean, I think there's something curious, isn't there, in terms of this. I mean, because they talk about the relationship of freedom and friend having the same linguistic root. And this is always a kind of slightly strange move in philosophy. I used to tell students, don't, for God's sake, give me an essay with an Oxford English Dictionary definition in it, because, you know, it's not a good place to start. But in some ways, it is a good place to start, because it kind of teaches us a little bit about the way in which our language has shifted and moved, and it's a kind of way of revealing some shifts. And there is I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not, but I'm not sure how. I mean, I think a lot. I think a lot of us kind of, or a common sense notion of freedom, of friendship, would actually have quite a close connection to friends and freedom. I think. So I mean, I know that there is this classic image of the friend that they're talking about as an individual free of, a freedom rather. They're talking about as individuals free of restriction, and I think that is dominant. But I do think when a lot of us think about friends, we also think about friends in a kind of relationship to freedom that the text kind of keys into. So I'm kind of curious about, when you think of your friends, do you think of them as enabling your freedom or bonding you somehow to some obligations? And you're going to have to X me or something, because I have frozen little screens on in my studio from you all, so I can't see any reactions, and so you'll just have to kind of like let me know who's next. You are kind of popping in every now and then. No, you've moved again. But yeah, that I mean, I did this sense that friends are part of our freedom. That seems to me almost like an open door. It seems intuitively like most people would agree with this, that friends aren't a restriction. Friends are an increase in your capacity, an increase in your freedom, and so that so I'm kind of curious as to that. There seems to be these two notions of freedom and friend at work in the text.
I think I have had friends in the past, but I think I kind of let them all go in some ways, because I don't know, I can't really feel any around me at the moment.
Did you feel, I mean, would you agree that friends just sort of give you a sense of freedom? They give you a broader sense of your capacities. This is the Spinozan sense of freedom. It's increasing your capacity, let's say. Do most of us kind of think that, or are friends burdens? Are they kind of things we have to sort out?
Well, I've been part of 2 institutions now where my friends were, I had to choose from the people that were there, i.e. a boarding school and in the police, because I wasn't allowed to have, it wasn't seem too good to have friends that were different to yourselves. So in that respect, they were forced friends, and you find something you like within that group. School, it was rugby, and so in that respect, it isn't necessarily a natural way of doing it. It was forced upon me, and it seemed quite normal at the time.
Oh, sorry.
Go on, Morrigan.
Sorry. Well, I think it depends on the friend, and I think it depends on the relationship. So actually, yeah, some friends are a burden, but potentially this is because there hasn't been the freedom within that relationship for it to blossom into something that is not constricted, and is an increase in capacity and therefore an increase in joy. And I wonder whether some of that, can be, I'm just going to sound like an old fucking trot now, aren't I? I wonder whether some of that can be kind of like put down to structural reasons where relationships become transactional in some sort of way. So, I mean, here's a bit of a shit example, but so Betty and Sam came to my house about 2 weeks ago and took up some of my kitchen floor tiles because I was overwhelmed by the problems relating to the kitchen. But it wasn't transactional. There wasn't a suggestion that somehow this was some sort of favor. Well, I'm hoping this isn't the case. I suspect this isn't the case, that this isn't a favor, and that this isn't a favor that then needs to be repaid, in some sort of way. that somehow I owe them something that, you know, I haven't quite got to grips with or something. And
Is
I
this
think
your banking model, the banking model that your sister
yeah,
has?
right, exactly. Yeah, the banking model, you know, if someone doesn't pay enough in, then they can't withdraw X amount. And I think this is where things get a little bit confused in friendships, is that people actually don't want to adopt the banking model. I think most people are aware that this isn't to be something transactional, you know, you cook me dinner, sorry, not that example. You know, you do something for me, I do something for you. You know, is that people don't want it to work on that exchange basis, because, you know, that's a bit of a problem, isn't it? Because if we turn our friendships into those relationships that are a little bit sort of reminiscent of bosses and workers or something like that, you know, sometimes we get to be the boss and the friend gets to be the worker, other times we have to be the worker and the friend gets to be the boss. I mean, that's just all completely shit, isn't it? But in terms of, do friendships make you free? I'm not, you know, ignoring the banking and the transactional and all of that sort of thing, I'm not 100% sure, because I think a friendship or a relationship does kind of bring with it duty, you know, and duty for me, not in a platonic sense, is it's something that I then have to be, you know, it's there in my consciousness. It's a relationship that's forged in a certain way, that has some sort of longevity attached to it. So with my friends, you know, I have a duty. If they phone me up at 4 o'clock in the morning and they're a complete mess, lying in the road, bleeding, I have to go and do something about it, you know. So yeah, I think it, I don't know. There seems to be freedom and there seems to be constraints as well. I don't know.
Okay, I'm going to go to Betty and then Gabby. So Betty.
Well, I was kind of wondering if we are a little bit kind of I've forgotten that English expression now, preaching to the converted, preaching to the choir, something like that. Because like I feel like the people who would see friendship as having some kind of constraints. No, okay, let me start from a different place. I think friendship does give a sense of a certain sense of freedom, or like a certain sense of increased capacity, because it is, or it could be in a way like not necessarily a safety net, but maybe a little bit like a safety net, right? Like there is people that you can rely on, and that can be really, really important. If you can't rely on yourself for certain things, like let's say I don't know, well, yeah, you need that, you couldn't do the kitchen floor by yourself, so you know, we came and helped you with the kitchen floor. Like friendship that kind of has that care and radicalness to it, I think can be liberating for people. And on the other hand, the friendship that that doesn't, it then becomes restrictive. In I don't know how to say this, but I'm imagining kind of a white posh dude working in the city. Like he probably doesn't have friends that you know, that he needs to look after him. Or I guess maybe when he's drunk, but you know what I mean. Like there is kind of more. There's different ways in which this guy would relate to the world. That would come from a position where he doesn't actually need to build friendships. He doesn't need to have mates to help him put his kitchen floor down, because he can pay somebody to come and put his kitchen floor down. So there is, I guess friendship can give you some kind of freedom if you don't have a privileged position in the West that allows you to buy that freedom. Is that what I'm saying? Oh, sorry, I'm really tired.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just going to go for a quick wee. Gabby?
Cool. Guess I'm sharing now. No, I was gonna say, I think with friendship, or with when you know anyone, anything really, to get to know something or someone, you kind of open yourself up to the flows and patterns that they give off by their existence in the world, whether it's like the very physical material things of their appearance by way of the light that bounces off them and hits your eyes or whatever, or the much seemingly more immaterial things of their personality, the way they laugh, the things that they want, etc. From those omittances, you build over time a model in your head of this person, and so you have a tiny version of them in your head, and that version of them that your brain is running like a sub-program includes their desires, includes their wants. The more you know them, the more open you are to them, the more you are open to the ways that they can affect you, the more the version of them in you becomes like them, and the more you share their desires. So the more you know someone, so to know someone is in some small way to share their desires, I think. And so when you're friends with someone, friendship is kind of a way of saying, or a version of a sustained relationship, of being open to this person. When you know them, they lost my train of thought. By sharing in their desires, you end up wanting. You can find that you want what they want, or want for them to get what they want, and that becomes an avenue, a possible flow capacity for your own desires to channel through, and suddenly, like, you're happy for someone else's satisfactions, achievements, wants, etc. So to me, I feel that that's a very kind of material, physical way that loving someone, whether friendship or some other relationship, kind of opens up your capacity for happiness and flow and desire by taking on the desires of another. Yeah, that's, I'll leave it at that for a moment. Am I making sense?
Sorry, I don't know about anyone else, but yeah, it sounds like it makes sense to me. Or other people have a, oops, I've got a whole bunch here. Let's try this. Sorry, the text is too long. Okay, I'll have to do that. I'll just read this little line and then see whether we can have a look at that. So on page 92, they say, through friendship or kinship, we undo ourselves and become new in potentially radical and dangerous ways. In this sense, friendship is at the root of freedom. So that kind of speaks to what you're saying a little bit there about this kind of undoing yourself or opening, having a flow that moves out. But it also speaks a little bit to some of the conversation at the start of last week when we were talking about do easy. So some of the things that were mentioned were meeting yourself. There was a conversation about meeting yourself and about self-overcoming and the relationship of mindfulness there. So, I mean, both the do easy techniques and these kind of relationships to friendships, we're talking about these kind of capacities for reorganizing, undoing, remaking, reworking, opening, all these kind of, I suppose we'd class them as positive dynamics towards the world. I think that I love all this, and I think it really, really does make a huge difference. I suppose there's two kind of questions that kind of niggling away at my in the back of my head. One is don't we already have friends? I mean, that in a sense, so this is kind of to go back a little bit to what I mean. It's like, well, what do they mean by friends then? Because don't we already have them? And the place is still a fucking shithole. Everything's a fucking mess, and our friends help us get through it, but it's still a fucking mess. So do they mean something slightly different by friends here? I think they do. I'm not quite sure what that difference is, but we already have friends. We know we have friends, or most of us have friends most of the time, let's say, or a lot of us have friends a lot of the time, something like that. And yet the world hasn't changed. So there must be, I think there might be something else that they mean by friend. So that's the one thought. And the other thought is, and this is maybe a little bit longer. So is there a difference? I think there is between friends and comrades. Okay, because this is a conversation I've had in Plan C. This is a conversation I've had with other people outside Plan C and in different organizations. And it's a conversation that kind of is taking place, I think, inside political discourse. That's the horrible word. But, the reason I say that is because there's this text by Comrades by Jodie Dean. And I remember reading, and it's actually a really interesting text itself. And that's much more about, and it's another text about undoing yourself, about getting away from being an individual, about working out how to be tied in with others in a positive way. And yet there, the thing that enables the binding is this sense of political activity, political organization, the group of which you are part, of which you are comrades. And so this kind of group exists above everyone else, and they are kind of connected up through this meta formation. Whereas in friendships, I mean, you're right, I think that there's probably some sort of fantasy activity going on all the time, and the person we're dealing with is as much the person that we fantasize them to be, or we have in our heads as they're actually there. But there's not a kind of external, or is there an external kind of dynamic in which we're kind of connecting up with friends? I mean, it seems a very broad term, this friend one. I mean, I can't work out whether I'm talking about people I go for a drink with on a Friday night, or people who I maybe do things that are a little bit more, I don't know, people you get stoned with on Wednesday, or or people you sit up talking till 4 a.m. with, which you do when you're a student maybe, or are they the people that are in your life for years and years and years? I mean, friends is a very broad term, isn't it? It's a very wide term, and it seems to have an awful lot of value attached to it. That it's like if you're Johnny No Mates, if you're someone without any friends, then supposedly that's some massive problem that but in fact a lot of people are quite happy not having a large group of friends. I speak for myself. I can't maintain large groups of friends. So I'm very curious about this, the kind of the breadth and in some sense not the vagueness, but the kind of ability of the idea of a friend to cover so much territory, from the person you go drinking with to the person that you're perhaps most intimate with in your life. Morrigan said it depends on the situation, but are the situations just too broad can we make the category work given that diversity, and does it work in contrast to comrades? So is there a real difference there? Or I
think when I was listening to your reading, I think before I had my dinner, I vaguely remember thinking that that there's some kind of face to the world, and I can't really face it. Like every time I try to face it, it's like it's kind of making me think something I don't want to think. So I kind of turned away and kind of like turn my back on it just before dinner tonight. And I found myself actually falling in love with what I was seeing, because I turned myself away from it so much, maybe worked hard so much during lockdown to really, really get that kind of, I think I can vaguely remember, but I can't really, but the kind of process of actually really turning my back on my life. And it really happened. Like, I just kind of lost it all. But I think I remember thinking, I'm just trying to kind of get my own vision, my own way of seeing the world, rather than actually being looked at and kind of, having to react to it. Like, to me, power is something that's creating a reaction. And I don't want to react, because it means I can't think and I can't do my own thing. So I think that's what I thought today, yeah.
Betty.
Well, sorry, should I guess correct that this was kind of your critique that was in the back of your mind? Is that what was
Kind of. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the text, and I think it's really important. But yeah, I'm just. It's this kind of. If I'm to approach it critically, this thinking about whether that category of friend, it's whether it kind of is all things to all people, and whether we're actually talking about the same thing when we talk about friends. Whether this is in the same way that we're not all talking about the same thing when we talk about work. Something along those kind of lines.
Okay, well, so what I was just thinking is, I know the text by Jodie Dean that you're talking about as well. I think there is a difference between comrades and friends. I'm not necessarily. I don't necessarily want to go into that territory. But I guess kind of vaguely, comrades would be people who you share the same political values with, for me, but not necessarily the same as friends. And I think I think they've kind of deliberately left it vague what friends means in the text, because it's not supposed to have like a strict definition, like the person who picks you up at 4 a.m. when you've like fallen in the ditch because you're so drunk and you've broken your arm. And it's not supposed to be only the person who you get stoned with on Wednesday night. It's supposed to, like, I'm guessing it's much more personal than that. And I would say probably the difference would be something to do with commitment and kind of I guess promise of some sorts. Like, I think Morgan called it duty. I wouldn't call it personally for myself duty, but I would call it, maybe commitment, which is doesn't have to be said out loud, but it comes with doing the act of being a friend. So how do you know that somebody is a friend? Well, you know that you can call them at 4 a.m. and they will come, which isn't to say that they've told you that, but you kind of like, I think for me, that's kind of like the line that I drew between like friends and people who I have drink with, or comrades. Like the ones that have done friendship are like, it's kind of like this process thing that just has to be repeated the whole time, and has to be, like, I guess kind of has to have certain level of care and commitment towards the other person, and that could take many different forms, I suppose. And I guess like what the other thing that they're talking about is friends giving you the space of I don't know, like kind of cushioned critique, opportunities to develop yourself in a positive way. So like maybe your friend is going to be the one who tells you, oh, well, actually, you were a bit of a dig the other day, and like that wasn't okay, and then and that could be a way of you undoing yourself or growing or whatever. So like kind of like a safer relationship where you have trust. So I guess, yeah, commitment and trust are the two main words for me that define friendship.
Okay. Anyone? I'm going to just draw up this kind of. I know this might take the conversation in a particular direction, but I thought I'd share this anyway. Oh, we can't see all of it. Ethics. Oh, yeah, it doesn't do the rest of it, unfortunately. I'll read that. There's a fundamental difference between ethics and morality. This is from Deleuze, and it's in the middle of the text that we're reading. Spinoza doesn't make up a morality for a very simple reason. He never asks what we must do. He always asks what we are capable of, what's in our power. Ethics is a problem of power, never a problem of duty. In this sense, Spinoza is profoundly immoral. I love that line, but okay, there we go. Regarding the moral problem, good and evil, he has a happy nature because he doesn't even comprehend what this means. This thing about it being a problem of power, not a problem of duty, we kind of seem to be bouncing into this because it seems difficult to disentangle friendship from duty or commitment. But that's that idea that ethics is a problem of power, that presumably is, I think, at least in the text, at least in Joyful Militancy, that idea that it's a problem of power, not duty, it's that enables it to be more than undoing ourselves. I mean, this is one of the things I think that's important about this text, actually, is it posits friendship as something that's able to do more than just undo ourselves. It's able to undo the social realm around us. And I think this is one of the things that's kind of fascinating, because, as I say, you kind of wonder, well, how is that possible if it hasn't already undone the world around us? And maybe it has. Maybe that sense that the world hasn't been undone is where it might be going wrong. But that idea that it's to do with power, not duty, I mean, that's it sounds great, it feels great, it is what I want to agree with. I'm not completely convinced that it makes whole sense, because it seems in the end that there's still a kind of a scale difference between friendship and something like community. There's some kind of important difference in scale in which, what we think of as a political exists in both of those different scales, but at the scale of the community, at the scale of kind of community activity, is friendship enough, or is it always going to be pushed to become something like an organization, like a political group, like a campaign, like a cause or something? In sense, wouldn't that be necessary? Because isn't friendship in some sense deeply undemocratic? I mean, you can't access. I mean, you don't want to be third wheel in someone's friendship. That's a fucking right pain in the butt. You don't want to be wandering, like going out with a bunch of mates, all who know each other and have got it's deeply disempowering to do that, to sort of try and go out with in other people's friendship circles. So there's a kind of curious closure to friendships and an intimacy, which seems in some ways in tension with the community elements that are kind of there in this idea of friendship as power. And I'm kind of curious how we connect those things, Rob.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, and I was thinking like an example that popped into my mind of sort of a friendship group becoming like almost like scaled up into sort of something potentially revolutionary, perhaps, would be like, I remember reading about sort of like friendship groups who sort of signed up to go and fight the Spanish Civil War together, and I thought that was really interesting, and it kind of made me think that maybe like the friendship, like an everyday friendship, is maybe it's more like a sort of a potential, like maybe it's like a sort of latent potential that could be explosive or revolutionary, but isn't in itself. I think I agree that it's not in itself. It has to be somehow not scaled up, but like not, maybe there has to be some sort of like, I don't like the word, but like some sort of project that the friends would then do together that would really, I don't know if, yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking at the moment.
There's this terrible like philosophical kind of like mantra about the condition for something. So let's talk about, let's say, the condition for revolutionary social change. So what are the conditions for this, and you can discuss what you might need to have in place for there to be revolutionary social change, and that's kind of what we're discussing, apart from other things. And in philosophy, we have this distinction between necessary and sufficient conditions. And so some things you have to have, but they're not in themselves are not enough. And it seems to me that that's one of the most potent things about this text, is that in speaking, I think Betty mentioned like the echo chamber or the circle, the preaching to the converted. In some ways, its audience is the left, and it seems to be arguing to the left, to the anarchists, the communists. Look, if you can't be fucking friends, you're never gonna have a revolution, and that is kind of true. I mean, that I absolutely fucking totally. You've got to get.
Can I just say something, right? I'm just thinking.
One second, Helen.
Right.
So yeah, on the one hand, it's trying to sort of say to the left and to the communists and anarchists, you've got to be friends, otherwise you can't have a revolution. But I'm on the other hand, just because you're friends doesn't mean there's going to be a revolution. I think that's kind of what you're saying there. Is that right, Rob? That kind of sense that something else has to work. Because the example from Spain is actually really interesting, because you're right, that was a very intimate relationship people had with the Spanish Civil War, and that kind of friendship thing was very important there.
Okay, but if we're talking about Fanon and the fact that he said that we need to be independent and free, the way that I see friendship, it's kind of like a circle, and it really fucking pisses me off. The way that I see it, I wrote a poem earlier today, and it was like, what it was is that I was born to die, basically. It's nature's way, like, that's the path you're going to take. So you're always going to remain right at the beginning and right at the end. So really, you've only got yourself, and whatever comes between that is always a friend, no matter what. Like, everyone you pass. So you have your own revolution. You have your own way of breaking through whatever system you want to break through. I mean, you can't really hold hands with anyone else.
You can't hold hands with anyone else. There's a lovely song that I'm going to stick on the river. You'll all hate it, I expect, if people don't know Carole King, but it's one of my. You've Got a Friend, and that's a Carole King song, and I've loved that song since I was a little kid, actually, because it has this kind of this. I mean, maybe a little bit like you're talking about people you pass on the way, but it has this kind of really high, intense, emotional, intimate value to friendship that's connected into there, but in a very, very plain way. But I don't know, anyone else? Are friends enough for change? And do we, Gabby?
I feel that one of the biggest trajectories of, okay, let me take a few steps back. One of the most powerful things in Marx's critique of capitalism, for lots of people, was that it seemed to analyze the imminent trajectories. So the trajectories imminent to the process of capital, and say that they would themselves lead to revolution. So the capital creates the working class. The working class will inevitably come to consciousness and fight for their interests, which are the universal interests, and so the classical Marxist argument goes, more or less. I bring that up because one of the big trajectories that it seems to me like of capitalism, of late capitalism, is individuation. That we all seem to, that there's this, like, going off Helen's kind of sense of are we all kind of fundamentally alone at the end of the day? Like it's I don't know, but it does seem like increasingly society, people in society, kind of, there's a breakdown of shared myths, breakdown of shared cultural, like even as we are more able to communicate globally across I can have an intelligible conversation with someone on the other side of the planet. At the same time, there's simultaneously like such a breakdown in kind of shared traditions, shared rituals, like that kind of structured daily life, that beyond the just market relations, people seem to increasingly rely on this kind of individuated myth making, individuated sense making of the world, which I feel like that, I can't say for sure. I feel like that is quite a deep fundamental trajectory to society these days, possibly globally, and that has it's ups and downs, but I'm wondering how much this talking about friendship is a kind of reaction against that trajectory. This kind of you might say like the utopians in Marx's day, who responded to the kind of creation of the working class and the industrial revolution by imagining an idyllic society that would just be constructed, that could just through pure political will. So people setting up communal villages with no money, all kinds of things. Those are the kind of people Marx would critique in his day, because to him the fundamental thing was to say, no, we need to go through capital, through when you find yourself in hell, you got to keep walking through. So I'm wondering if perhaps the trajectory to explore here is not fantasizing about creating friendships out of political will or whatever, just going like, yes, we will create friendships kind of thing, but actually to push forward this individuation, this trajectory, and perhaps that could lead to new relations through by going more into the loneliness, more into the isolation. Perhaps it will actually, I don't know, lead to new relationsps from that.
The acceleration of the anti-friend.
Maybe it's a thing that
Well, no, that
occurs to me to explore.
No, totally. And there is, I suppose, yeah. I'm kicking against this sort of like, I suppose, feeling of agreeing too much. But that sense of it kind of opening up a space, a utopian space, or the kind of space I was talking about as dream space. That kind of idea that that friendships offer us an insight into a possible utopic kind of rearrangement of the social structure. They kind of offer us a potential.
Yeah. I was thinking earlier today, like about friendship, and I was thinking like trying to remember, the kind of the little bits that maybe have gone away somewhere, and I was just thinking it's kind of like the reason why they didn't stick around is probably because I'm not good enough or something. I don't really have the skill base or the intelligence or the humor or the charisma or the politeness and all this jazz, and or the duty, I don't know, whatever word you want to put on it. But yeah, so I'm just thinking, you know, the thing is with philosophy is that you can ask like whatever question you want to ask. And for me, friendship is someone that will always answer. That to me is friendship.
It's quarter past. I'm going to get people to go around like for the last go. So have any last thoughts or any last questions here? I'm interested in I suppose the kind of in maybe pursuing this sense of freedom a little bit further. We've looked a little bit, so I'm vaguely interested in pursuing that a little bit further myself. But anyway, last kind of round, last kind of comments, last kind of thoughts. Shall I just go around? Shall we sort of have a random? Rob, how about you?
Gosh, it's always hard. Last thoughts. I really enjoyed the text, and I hopefully will pick up a copy. And there seems to be this like thread running through everything I'm thinking about at the moment, which is like something about Spinoza mixed up with Marx and Deleuze and Guattari, and yeah, there's like this thread keeps popping up all the time, and it's like what's going on there is really interesting, and then sort of slowly I'm following it, but I'm not quite sure like where it will go. But I find it really interesting. So yeah, that's all I'll say.
It's a good thread to follow, I think. Morrigan, how about you? Morrigan, any last thoughts, comments? I can cheer me. She's got a finger in her mouth. Hey, babe. No, we'll come back to Morrigan in a minute. She might be checking something out. She's got a lot of work to do. Gabby, last thoughts or things before we wander off?
No, I just exhausted my thought. Can you come back to me after the other two?
Of course. I'll go to Betty and then Helen and then maybe Morrigan. Betty, last thoughts.
Last thoughts. Well, I mean, I don't feel like they'd be exactly last thoughts because I feel like we're probably going to be coming back to the question of friends and community and all of that. But I just found a little sentence here that I've been staring at for the last 5 minutes on page 95, which is about freedom. And I quite liked it, so I thought I would read that out, which is freedom is the space that opens when knee-jerk reactions and stifling habits are suspended. And I guess I quite like that one. Oh wow, it's popped up now. Wow, that's very fancy.
I was actually looking at the same line. I don't written down.
And yeah, I quite liked it because I think if we're talking about revolution and change and all of these things, change is so difficult to happen on so many levels. And you've just you were just talking about like necessary and sufficient conditions, and it's very hard to. The world is so complex, it's very hard to conceptualize what would be necessary or insufficient conditions for change. But I quite like that idea of freedom as when you like, it's almost like you're free of yourself, or like of that self that maybe you've been kind of kept in. And you could do that with the help of people who care about you, i.e. your friends. Yeah, thank you for putting my sentence up there.
I like that line, free from yourself. Yes, that's possibly an interesting way of thinking about that kind of. Again, that's maybe too restrictive, but it's that freedom from what you've become maybe already, or something along those lines. But yeah, Helen, last thoughts before we wander off?
No, sorry.
That's cool. And how about you, Gabby? Have you got any last ones now? Giving you a moment.
Yeah, sure. I really like the text. I liked the emphasis on. I like the emphasis on friendship. I like that as a kind of topic for philosophical inquiry. I like, as I said, I feel like we could go more into this idea of freedom. Becoming the overcoming of obstacles, or the enacting of your power upon obstacles, rather than just being something that is completely constrained by said obstacles. I also like the ecological the emphasis on ecological thought and thinking, and that's an avenue I'd like to go to. I'd like to just explore more Spinoza, really.
Spinoza is a really curious figure. I mean, Rob's right. He has this very important role to play at the moment, and probably for the last 40, 50 years, maybe, inside political theory, an increasingly important role. It's one of those things, I think I mentioned at the start, it's one of those things I absolutely love Spinoza, and at the same time, I absolutely can't possibly agree with him. There's no possibility that I could agree with Spinoza, and yet at the same time I almost love everything too much. And there's something, you're right about the idea of friends as well. There's something very, I mean, one of the definitions of a philosopher is a lover of wisdom, philosophia. But in fact, it's friend quite often. If the philo is the friend more often than the lover, and it's one of the distinctions between the philosopher and the sophist is that the philosopher is a friend of truth. Rather than the sophist who doesn't really give a shit. It's kind of whatever works, whatever does the job, whatever pays the pay. And so there's something even like intimate to the very end sense of philosophy that has a connection to friendship. And I think maybe there's some relationship there to like both the utopic, the communist, the undoing of ourselves, the freeing from ourselves. I think as Betty said, we're going to come back to this kind of thing. All right, everybody, it's lovely to have you along again. We had, obviously, Betty put forward some text this week. I can encourage you to do the same. If you can find a little bit of text, that's absolutely great. If you are able to make a little recording, then brilliant. Otherwise, just let me know when.
Can I just quickly say something? Sorry, that's the third time. That's strike free of interruptions tonight. I'm doing really well. I think what I was experiencing earlier was that what Fanon said about the body that questions, right? It's like the things that I feel is not only in my head, it's my body that feels them too. So like when people say things to me like, oh, you don't have any friends, I might have a mental breakdown over it, but really it's my whole body that is experiencing something. And I'm only starting to realize that those comments are actually quite cold, and that my body can feel quite shivery in the atmosphere when I hear those words said to me. And it's like, I'm not saying those words to myself. The world is telling me those words, and it's making me feel cold. And it's a cold atmosphere that's coming my way. It's real. Those words carry energies that are real. And so what's happening with my body is becoming an armor against these energies that are coming my way. And every time my body feels this energy that's coming my way, it's able to retract it and push it back. So I can actually become quite a warm person inside.
Yeah, I think this speaks to that sense of like friendships having the capacity, but not. And this is one of the things that's kind of important with the Spinoza is they have capacity, but they have capacity both to increase or decrease. And I think this is one of the things about using Spinoza in politics is it can go both ways. And and so that's also is worth bearing in mind, that kind of relationship. And it's the same. I mean, I think the same with philosophy and truth. It can become a little bit too obsessive of a friend sometimes, of the phrase of truth. All right. So as I was saying, if you've got texts, put them forward. Got bits and things you want to look at, put them forward. If you can read them out and do that, that's great. If not, let me know and I can make something for people. so that we can have them as audios, little bits of audio as well, as long as they're not ridiculous. I'm not reading fucking 4 hours of Proust or something, you know what I mean? But I'm happy to read 20 minutes, 30 minutes of a text, so that we can pop it on the radio and listen to it in the car or on the bike or whatever. All right, everybody, thank you very much for the evening. I will catch you on River. Everyone, you need to all rest and look after yourself on the first week back at heavy work and do all those kind of things. So go and have a nice evening bath or glass of wine or big fat doobie or whatever it is you do to relax. And maybe catch you next week. Thank you very much.
Bye.
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 Thanks very much, everybody. Just to remind you, freedom is the space that opens when knee-jerk reactions and stifling habits are suspended, from Joyful Militancy, page 95. And this week we were thinking a little bit about joyful militancy by looking at that text on friendship and revolution. You're welcome to follow us in our conversations. You're welcome to add questions, comments, or thoughts in the chat channel if you want to, either on Twitch or YouTube or Facebook. And the recordings of the sessions, if you want to have a little podcasty kind of experience, are all around on Twitch if you want to listen to them. If you want to get involved in Free University Brighton, it's freeuniversitybrighton.org, and all the details are there. It's primarily for people in the Brighton area, but we do have people from all over the place. Give us a follow on Twitch if you get a chance, and thank you very much, and we will see you soon, I expect. Next week, probably.